Welcome to the Hotel Investors Marketplace produced by Hotel Brokers International. I'm Brandt Niehaus, President of HBI and President of Huff, Niehaus Associates, Inc., a hospitality real estate brokerage and consulting firm located in Louisville, Kentucky. The Hotel Investors Marketplace is designed to provide today's hotel owners and investors with the most current industry information and an opportunity to preview recently listed hotels. While everyone is getting signed in and comfortable, we will highlight a few of HBI members' listings on the screen, and I'll share a few other items with you. Hotel Brokers International was founded in 1959 and is the leading network of real estate brokers specializing exclusively in hotel real estate investment, providing every phase of the brokerage process from property valuation to closing. HBI hotel brokerage specialists have successfully negotiated more than 10,000 hotel real estate transactions and annually account for the greatest market share of all select service and economy hotel sales in the United States. You can visit HBI on the website at www.hbihotels.com. If any time during this webcast you have any questions, just click on the Ask Question button found on the gray bar located at the top of the webcast player. Type in your question and submit it. We will answer as many of them as we have time, and don't hesitate to ask more than one question. We want to let you know that we want you to let us know how we're doing. So also you'll see a rate button to click up in the corner in the gray bar. Please do so towards the end of the presentation and give us some feedback on this presentation. Later today, this webcast will be posted on the demand viewing at hbihotels.com, and you can come back and listen to it again and maybe follow up on some points you missed at your leisure. Today our discussion topic is roles of the owner, controller, and CFO in a data security. Today we have with us two participants, presenters from Clark Nuber, a CPA firm in Bellevue, Washington. They're a consulting firm as well, helping all types of industries with their CPA needs, and with today's topic of data security. Julie Eisenhauer is one of our speakers, and she's a shareholder at Clark Nuber, where she provides audit, assurance, and consulting services to privately owned companies. She also leads the hospitality industry practice area, which serves hotels, restaurants, entertainment companies, private and public clubs, conference facilities, and more. Peter Henley serves as their Senior Director of IT for Clark Nuber and is responsible for aligning IT with the firm's strategic business plan and making Clark Nuber the most technologically advanced accounting firm in the Northwest. He has been recognized with many industry awards for unified inbox, client portals, SharePoint workflow, and speech recognition. They will be presenting today a slide presentation on how to reduce some of your risk and the issues involved in data security, in particular with the hotel industry. I want to welcome Julie and Peter. Thank you for being with us today. Would you like to introduce yourselves in any other way, add anything to what I just said?
Brandt, I think you covered it. Thank you.
Okay. Well, then let me turn it over to you, Julie, and I'll let you get started, and you and Peter can pass the baton back and forth as you go through the presentation.
Okay. Thank you, Brandt. Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you're joining us today. Data breaches strike all industries, but for the hospitality industry, the stakes are extremely high, and the financial impact to a company can be significant. So why are hotels of such interest to information thieves? There's three main areas The main one being there's a lot of transactions being done through credit cards and debit cards, and fraudsters love payment card data. It's just very valuable, and we'll see that in some of our future slides here, how much value that information can bring them. Hotels are frequently tied to other computer systems, so they might be tied to their hotel brand through their reservations or their accounting system. They might also be tied to outside vendors that they're using on a regular basis. Hotels also see high turnovers in employees, and as a result, there could be poor employee training in proper security practices that can make a hotel vulnerable to data breaches. Security industry experts actually state that data breaches are unavoidable. It's not a question of if a company will become a victim, but when. So the objective of our presentation today is to provide you with some practical steps to help reduce your risk by taking some proactive action steps. So our program discussion today will follow these concepts here that we've listed on the screen. We're going to walk through the key statistics. Why is this important to us? What's the magnitude that we're looking at? We've done some informal surveys of owners and CFOs in this area on data security, and we'll look at the results of that and see how you might compare there. Why are controllers and CFOs getting involved in data security, and what are their new roles there? We'll look at key components in data security and information technology risk management. What are some best practices for managing information technology? And then how do we mitigate risks when we're using mobile devices or cloud computing? Key statistics in cybersecurity. So we all think it's not going to happen to us. I'm a small company. My risk is low. Breaches at large companies make the headlines. You've seen Wyndham, you've seen Target. There's a lot of them out there that make the headlines. But small companies are at risk too. In certain industry sectors, actually, the cyber criminals are frequently breach smaller businesses. So, for example, smaller hospitality businesses by far rank #1, with retail being #2. And 40% of breaches attack on point-of-sale systems. So that's why those two are ranked high, hospitality and retail. 78% of all companies in the U.S. suffered some sort of data loss or theft in the last 2 years. And 44% of small business state that they have been a victim of cybercrime of some kind at least once. More than half of U.S. small businesses have experienced at least one data breach. And 75% of respondents in a recent survey say that they've had or expect to have a data breach that results in negative publicity. So we see here on the slide why these payment card fraud is so valuable to these cyber thefts or criminals is that there's top dollar that they can get, $45 per record if they get access to stolen platinum cards. And we've got $3 for Social Security numbers and such. So there's high dollars there, and the magnitude of the data that's in our systems can bring top dollar to them. The 2014 Ponemon Institute report states that it costs a company $201 per personal record stolen. And this is up from $188 in 2013. So some of those costs could be direct costs, such as forensic experts that need to be hired to really identify where our total loss might be. You might be outsourcing hotline support or providing free credit monitoring. There's also the valuable indirect costs of investigations, communications to customers, and then your loss of trust from the customer and loss of customers themselves could be very damaging. So like I said earlier, we did a informal survey of controllers and CFOs who work with companies in the hospitality and retail industries. And the following are our results that we received, and how would you answer these questions yourself? How often do you encounter technology-related questions or concerns in your role at the company? So as we see here in our results, 82% say they frequently receive questions or concerns over their IT technology. 18% said minimally, and there's not one person that said they never get a question around that. We also asked them, what is your top concern regarding your role in data security? And these were their top concerns: securing the environment. So being conscious about keeping your customer data or your employee data, even your investor data, safe. You might even have trade secrets and other information that needs to be kept secure. Whether they have the right people in place. So how do I monitor if I'm outsourcing my IT firm management? And I have difficulty finding resources and the needed expertise to manage my data security. Our resources internally are overloaded, so how do I prioritize and manage those resources effectively? They question what their role is. So, technology is constantly changing. How do I stay up to date? What are my current threats? How do I stay informed? What questions should I be asking an IT professional when I'm not an IT expert myself? Losing important data is, data now is valuable. We're all trying to provide that that personal touch, that personal experience, and so we're maintaining and retaining a lot of data on our customers, and so losing that would be damaging for our business. And then just risk management. How do we secure our reputation, our trust from our customers, our clients, and defer fraud? How confident are you in understanding the risk associated with information technology? 29% stated they were very confident, while 71% stated they were somewhat confident. So this supports their earlier concerns about, not knowing how to stay up on changing technology and what questions should I be asking. What do you see as your top technology initiatives, ranked from 1 to 3, 1 being the top initiative? This identifies what's been spoken to earlier. Securing the IT environment is very important to them. That's one of their top initiatives. Managing IT risk and compliance. There's becoming more and more regulations around IT and complying with those regulations. And then managing and retaining the data. How do I secure it? How do I maintain it? The American Institute of Certified Public Accountants did a survey themselves to top U.S. accounting professionals on what are their top 5 technology priorities this next year. And the results of this mirror exactly what our results of our informal survey stated, is that the securing the environment is a top concern of theirs and a top priority. In fact, it's been their number 1 listed priority for 8 times out of the last 10 surveys. So it is a top concern for many overseeing the finances of an organization. The information the CFO controls and works with on a daily basis is the most sensitive and important. Like I said earlier, you're going to have investor information that you're retaining. You'll have employee information, Social Security numbers, health records, customer data, credit card numbers. So very sensitive and important information that they're the watch over on a daily basis. And so the CFO must understand where this information is at all times. How is it secured? Who might want to steal it? And how are they going to gain access to our system? The CFO has a strategy. They're the strategic direction for a company in the financial area, and they need to have the big picture of an entity and their entity risk. So working with an IT professional is imperative here. The owner controller or CFO need to ask the right questions of IT around the data security and focus on risks that have a high likelihood and a substantial impact on the business, so the risk and rewards. You might have heard recently in the news, the Wyndham Hotel Group actually back in 2008 and 2009 had a significant data breach and hit the publications and was in the headlines, and they've, it's been 4 or 5 years now. They're back in the press again because of their negligence in their stewardship over collecting and storing customer data. So a recent court ruling involving Wyndham highlighted their operator's obligation to secure personal data, stating that the Federal Trade Commission has authority to regulate cybersecurity. The ruling stated that they had conduct that was unfair business practice and that its privacy policy was deceptive. So they had on their website that they were securing all of their customer data and everything was secure and tight. Well, they weren't acting in their stewardship role and actually securing that like they say they were doing. So they've now got another bad press even 5 years after the event has happened. So there's a lot of regulatory penalties involved here. There's your brand reputation damage that's at risk, as well as any financial strategic losses. Each state has their own regulations around communicating breaches, and each have their own penalties as a result.
Julie, were those breaches within the Wyndham corporate reservation system, or was it through a series of different hotels?
Well, that's a really good question. It actually came internally. So one of their hotels, an employee within a hotel logged on to the internet, and that then computer was connected to their brand, and so it went directly to the brand itself, their national headquarters, which then infects all of their hotel owners that are associated with that brand, because that network of their computers being
but it did start at a property.
It started internally, yes.
Yeah.
That's where training becomes very important. Oops. Go back here, one more slide. So following the significant data breaches that have occurred over the last few years, is managing IT security the new normal for owners and controllers and CFOs? The recent surveys suggest that it is. So like I said earlier, the owners and controllers must take a more comprehensive approach to the financial health of the company by addressing the IT in more of an enterprise risk assessment basis and on a regular ongoing basis. Technology is constantly changing. This is something that can't be done once and ignored. It needs to be done on a regular basis. So it's asking yourself, what could go wrong? Where's our data? How can they enter our system? That's my auditor hat. I'm constantly working with my clients thinking about what could go wrong, what could damage your reputation, what could hurt your brand, what could affect your financial reporting. IT security must be a top priority in defending your company's future and financial sustainability. And it must also be correctly prioritized and aligned with the business needs. So that's where Peter comes in, is walking through, what's realistic here. We can't do it all. We can't secure everything, but what's someone in our position, what can we do to really take a stewardship role over this risk?
Thank you, Julie. Hi, everyone. This is Peter Henley. Today's discussion for executives such as yourself, as Julie said, there's two things that I think can really help you work through these materials today. One is that you need to have the correct amount of knowledge surrounding security and cyber theft. The correct amount of knowledge is different for everyone, but you can't have no knowledge. And I don't recommend that you have a lot of knowledge that would be redundant with your technical people. So the right amount of knowledge is what you need. The second thing is the information that you need to talk to your technical people. And you do, and so that might be a checklist, that might be a presentation like you're looking at today, but discussion points. No one is expecting you all to just come up with questions and ideas around security out of your experience or out of your mind. So we've got some of those materials for you today. And then one more thing before we start in on the discussion is that it's people, sometimes executives like ourselves, we think that we have to be the ones to figure out what the technical people are saying. But it really is the other way around. And I've had discussions with technical people, and they start throwing acronyms out there or talking too technical, and I'll stop them right away and say, look, explain that to me in plain English. And most of the time they can get through that, but it's their responsibility to talk to us, not ours to talk to them. Okay, so first of all, security is all about perception. And the story I have behind that is if you have an old 5-year-old firewall or something, and one of your tech's brother-in-laws configured it a couple years ago, it actually might be a very good setup with the right configuration and serving you well. But if you do have a problem, that is not what you want to present to your constituents or to a judge who's saying, what did you do to secure your environment? Because it's not perceived well. So perception is a big deal. Second thing, balance, the balance of cost, user access, and complexity. We can't, if you make the system too secure, no one can use it. If you can have a system that's way too secure for your environment, and you've wasted money on it. And then also the complexity, which is how it's configured. If it's too complex to configure and to maintain, like Julie said, going forward, then you don't have the right balance. So that balance, that's sometimes difficult to get. Usually people start with cost and then tighten it up so their users have enough security, but not too much. That's something you'll have to work on with your technical people over a long period of time. 3 aspects of security: physical, logical, and social. Physical, obviously, is having a locked door on your server rooms, making sure that you keep your laptops close by. Logical, people usually don't understand, but you could just think of it as credentials, username and password. And so you get into your system, and then most people can't get into their firm's payroll. That's logical security. And then social now is a very, very big deal, and we'll talk about that a little later when we talk about training. But mainly the idea there is that your employees are trained so that when someone calls and says they're from the help desk and they'd like to get their username and password, they don't get it. That's the main thing there. A couple other things to understand here is data. When we talk about data, there's really 2 ways to think of it. One is data that you're transmitting over the internet, and the other is data that's just sitting on a hard drive, whether the hard drive is on a laptop or on a server or maybe in a cloud application. There are very different kinds of security that go with those, and to keep it simple, I'll say that the data in transit is in a web browser, and you look there to, for instance, when you go to your bank, you make sure that you're on the bank's website, and you make sure there's a little padlock in the browser bar, and so when you transmit data, it's encrypted and it's secure. Data at rest, the best example there is that, and something you'll hear me say more than once today, is that you need to encrypt your laptops. Laptop encryption is just essential nowadays. And then security assessments. In the past and for the last 20 years, we've always dwelt mainly on the perimeter. We don't want the bad guys to get to our firewall. But now what we're seeing is very few intrusions take place as an attack from the outside. More of them happen from the inside, usually by mistakes that your users are making. The two most common ones would be clicking on the wrong URL in an email, the wrong link, and then that downloads files and the computer is infected and spreads to the network. The second one is people picking up USB keys. I know this sounds really specific, but it happens a lot, is people will find a USB key, plug it into their computer, and away they go. The virus is in there. So some best practices in general for managing IT, and you can apply security to all of these. But I put this slide in there just to give you an idea of the overall environment. So if you're treating IT as a cost and trying to keep it as low as possible, and just you're running old gear, your people are not trained, then there's a pretty good chance that your security is not up to date either. So treating IT as an advantage to yourself, something to leverage your business, something to help you complete your business plan, accelerate your growth. That's the best idea to have around IT, and security will come along quickly with that. You can see training on this slide that I mentioned. Really important to have hopefully some sort of annual security training for your people, and that could take place in a formal setting with teacher-led security, or it could be small snippets of security on YouTube. I've seen that quite a bit, and it works well. And then the last item there is interesting for executives, and that is don't shy away from different things. Be a power user. Technicians, we're all power users. Executives, we need to be curious about systems and click on things. Of course, not the URL in the email, but the right things. So don't shy away from it. Get in there and make some trouble. Mobile devices, clearly a large concern nowadays. And the four on these bullet points, there's four of them that make a mobile device management policy. And those inventory is just knowing what mobile devices you have connected to your network. But the next four then, encryption. Phones need to be encrypted, and most modern phones come encrypted. Password enforcement. People have to have a password on their phone. And then to make that secure, an inactivity timeout. I think iPhones, for instance, maximum is 15 minutes. Then that's fine. Just something so that if they lose their phone and somebody finds it a half an hour later, it's not going to be open. And then finally, the ability to wipe a device. And by that, if the IT department can see the device, then most, for instance, if it's hooked up to Microsoft Exchange using Outlook email, then your IT department is going to be able to kill that device, and that's important to have. So those, you can get really expensive MDM systems, but frankly, we don't run a really expensive one, but we have these four items firmly in place. But that's the key.
Peter, many of our listeners are probably the smaller operators, or at least we do have a good following of the investors that own 5 or less hotels. So they generally don't have an IT department. You've made some good suggestions here, but do you have maybe some broad brush thoughts that they should keep in mind as procedures that you would suggest them to implement, or how they would go about? Because, like a lot of this is new information to a typical smaller operator who hasn't, had to deal with IT or these kind of issues. What would you recommend to him for him to do to sort of protect himself?
Great question. And two things come to mind. One is we've all got IT systems, and whether we have an in-house IT department or whether we have a consultant that's outside that we've outsourced our technology to. Every company has to have some sort of IT influence there. So if what I just mentioned earlier about, for instance, wiping a phone, if somebody loses their phone and you have to call your IT consultant and tell him to wipe it, that works fine. The other thing
is that something that's pretty typical an IT guy would know how to do, to track down that phone and do that, or do you have to talk to certain IT people?
That's a good question, and no, the answer would be no. That is something that any technician who's involved with your system would be able to do that. Now, it makes it really easy if you have that discussion first or soon, before something bad happens, before someone loses a phone, for instance. And this is a good idea to do with all your security. The trick really is to have discussions first, so that when something happens, you know what to do. And so you talk to your IT person and you say, hey, I saw a webinar, and they say I need to be able to wipe a phone if one of my people loses it. Can you see all of our phones on your screen? And if they can't, then it's not expensive to make it so they can, and they need to be able to. If those phones have corporate information on them, then they need to be secure. And so the technician most likely is going to say, oh yeah, we can wipe your phones real easy. I've got a console here and it's no problem.
I assume there's other things besides just phone that the IT person could maybe even go back and view this webinar with the owner and come up with ideas that might suggest practical applications for that smaller operator.
Yep, that's exactly right. I would highly recommend that. And that gets back to the first point I said about having the right balance in place, because your IT provider can make you can make you like Fort Knox, but you don't need that.
Right.
So there's the balance. And so when you tell your person, we need to be really secure, I saw a webinar today, they're going to sit down with you and say, well, what about this? What about that? And then that's where you need to hold that technical person to be able to describe things well and not depend on you to know all the technical aspects of it. But you have that discussion. You get the security in place that you need at the right cost, and then even that is building what you'll have in place, so that if a breach does happen, you know what to do, and you know what capabilities you have, and you've had that discussion with your IT person ahead of time. Those are great points, Brandt. So here we have, mobile is a big thing. Cloud is of course, everybody knows about cloud computing now. And without going through all these bullet points, the main thing with cloud, very similar to mobile devices, is having an inventory of what you have. Really, and here's something I would recommend that you memorize and think about for a minute or two, and that is that as people in charge of, or where the buck stops with security, there's two things about our data. One is that we need to know what data we have and where it is. And the second thing is we need to know who has access to that data. And so those are both inventory items. So we've got computer inventories, we've got software inventories, we've got mobile device inventories, and we've got inventories of our data. And then in addition, we've got now software that runs in the cloud. And we need to separate that from on-premises software and inventory those two items separately. The reason being is that we are not responsible for the security of those. Someone else is, someone outside your organization is. And so that's a lot different than software that resides on your server and that your employees use. So this whole slide deals with all the cloud, all the ideas of how to go about assessing the risk on your cloud applications, developing policies so that people know the proper use of them. And I won't go through every bullet point here. The second from the last one, purchase data breach insurance, is a bit of a new idea for many companies. It's just in the last year or maybe two, the insurance brokers are figuring out how to do that. The policies are not expensive, and I will say that probably one of the biggest advantages of these policies is that you have someone else there, a phone call away, to help you through a breach. So it's not just an insurance policy that you have a data breach and horrible things happen, and then some insurance company pays for it. The data breach insurance that you should have, and that the insurance companies want to provide you with services because it mitigates their costs. So you have a problem, you realize it's a problem, you make one phone call, and then your data breach insurance company takes over. And so they're in charge of finding how extensive the breach was, of notifying or of responding to the media. It's always a big deal. So everyone needs to look into data breach insurance if you haven't already. It's not overly expensive. For instance, here at Clark Nuber, we carry $1 million policy for about $7,500 a year. So it's not insignificant, but hopefully affordable.
With cloud computing, a lot of smaller operators will use, free services or minimal kind of monthly charges for keeping files out in the cloud. And so that's a third-party company that's providing that cloud service. What kind of concerns, are those companies covering these security issues, or do the smaller operator need to consider insurance and some of the other aspects that you brought up? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do.
Small guys tend to depend on these third parties to be doing everything. Is that right? Is that safe?
The short answer is yes. That's what we're paying them for. Basically, we're taking software out of our own environment, out of our own control. At least some of our own control goes away. And we're paying someone else to do it, which is an excellent model. We need to do what we do best and pay somebody for what they do best. Julie, go to the next slide on here. I'll come back to this one. Next, yeah. And here, I put this on there the way it is, but you can basically ignore everything on the right-hand side and look at the very first column. That is a list of certifications that cover the gamut, and Microsoft has done a great job. Now, if you don't have health information, then you don't need HIPAA certification. And if you don't do work with the federal government, then there's others you don't do. If you don't do any education, then some of these are not for you. The two that, and the reason I wanted to show this first is the two that we're interested in is the bottom two, actually the bottom one, SOC 2. And that happens to be an American Institute of Certified Public Accountants certification. So that falls right in Julie and my wheelhouse. And so I show those to you just to say that there's a lot, but also to say that that is all of them. And so the providers that you use need to have some of these certifications, not all of them, but at least the bottom one. Okay, go back one slide. And so here's a checklist for you to work through with your technical people. And this is when you, it says contract on there, and certainly all these items are in a contract. But more to the point, it's the discussion about, could be a discussion about what software you use, what cloud software you use, and the different risks that you have with that, and the different risks that you're paying someone else to have with a cloud application. So this is, let me pick one out here. Number 3, meaningful SLAs. SLA stands for service level agreement. And that would be, the simplest part of that would be that the cloud provider says, we guarantee that our software will be available to you 99.9% of the time. And they'll have other items in their service level agreement that either you or your technician or IT consultant can go through. Data ownership is a fear that everyone has, and who can get to that data. Once again, what data do we have and who has access to it? For the hotel industry, I don't think we're too concerned about the NSA getting into our data. It's Microsoft and Google's job, to name a couple, to make sure they can't. But once again, I'm talking about balance here. So for the small operator, I would recommend that you just use a reputable data center and a reputable cloud provider. So if you're using Gmail, you're pretty secure. Gmail, you have a good service level agreement. Gmail doesn't go down very often. And now the same thing, of course, with Microsoft Office 365. So I would say, as part of the balance, that you not get too carried away with this slide, but that you use it as a discussion tool with your technical person. And so here we are at the details around how to address your cloud provider of software or your cloud provider of data, and what to talk about. So I made the slide all-inclusive, but I'll just hit the highlights and say that we're interested in SOC 2, and we're interested in Type 2. Now, you might, and so what we're talking about here is that maybe you have a line of business software, a management piece, and so you call them up and you say, I'd like to see your certifications, your security certifications, specifically a SOC 2 report, or SSA 16 is another, I think we saw that on the last page. But a SOC 2 report is pretty standard, and all the data providers should have that. And so you call them up, or your IT person calls them up and says, I'd like to see your SOC 2 report. If the SOC 2 report that they look at is Type 2, that's good. That's what you want. If it's Type 1, that's hopefully it'll be Type 2 in future years, but Type 1 is still okay. And so you tell them you need a SOC 2 report, and then you get the SOC 2 report, and the first thing it says is that the application is compliant with SOC 2, with the standard, but the data is hosted somewhere else, and so this report doesn't include the data. This is what we call carved out. And so that doesn't help us a lot. And so then my question to them is, okay, who's got the data? And they may, hopefully they say something like, Amazon Web Services has it, one of the big guys, Microsoft Azure. And you say, okay, I'd like to get their SOC 2 report. Well, they're not going to give it to you unless they're recommended by your provider. And I'm trying to paint a picture that's complicated here to make my point, is that when I say three-tiered here, you call up your software provider, they say, well, we'll give you what we have, but we don't have your data. And so you call up the data center and they say, well, you're not a customer of ours. So you go back to the cloud provider and they have to introduce you to them. And then the data provider sends you this horrible NDA that you have to sign. And finally you get the SOC report of where your data is. So it's, I know it sounds horrible, but this is what we need to do to make sure that we're using the right thing. And so once again, it makes it a lot easier if you're using large applications that millions of people are using. The problem is when you get a small application and there might be only 50 other customers using it, and nobody's ever heard of their data center, those are the ones that you have to get specific with.
When you say application,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Brandt.
Sorry. When you say application, are you essentially meaning a third-party vendor, or are you talking about some kind of service that just very few people use, so therefore it's not
not guaranteed to be secure.
Not guaranteed, yeah. I guess that's it.
Yep. And so cloud applications, they are popping up every minute. If you're using Office 365 email, that's a cloud application, and that's one you're not going to have to be too concerned about. But a smaller one you will have to be concerned about, and inquiry should be done.
The one thing I wanted to highlight on this screen, too, that as an auditor we look at on a regular basis is the user controls, that bullet point second from the bottom. The controls at these service organizations are only as strong as the users' controls internally are. So if their reports will actually highlight, here's the controls that we're strong here, but we're expecting your controls in these areas to be strong as well. And a lot of those are geared towards access rights. So, we're looking at this and we're doing employee benefit plan audits, for example, is that, you have entry into your plan administrator's books and records and Social Security numbers, and our controls are really strong over that. But if you have really weak internal controls that anyone can have access into this data, then we are not liable. That's really, we're depending on you to also have your own user controls in place. So that's something that we're looking at as auditors, is these are only as good as the users using them are strong as well.
Well said. So in summary of this here, and I know it's complicated, the idea is that if your data is somewhere else and someone else has control over it, you need to at least do some due diligence work so that if something bad happens and the question comes, well, what did you do to vet this software? You took data and let it out of your control. What did you do to make sure that it was safe? And you need to have something to say. And the easiest thing to say is, well, we got their SOC 2 report. And that will suffice in 90% of the cases. So a lot of detail here, but that's the major idea. It's really not acceptable to use a cloud provider, have a breach, and someone says, well, what did you do to protect our data? You don't want to have to answer with nothing.
There's a question here. I don't know if this is the right place for it, but if a hotel outsources their credit card transactions and payroll, and that vendor has a breach, who's responsible for the data? Is it the hotel or that vendor?
Great question. That's a great question, and the answer is both. The hotel is the steward of that information. They're accountable to their customers, to their guests. Now, what we've gone through here on that last slide is a way to pass that along to the people who actually have the data. And so in the service level agreement, that SLA we talked about, you'll see language like that. And a lot of times the language will say, we don't take any responsibility for your data, and you're completely responsible for it, and we accept no liability for it. And so that's when you need a SOC 2 report, because you're basically holding them accountable to something, even if it's not as much as you might like.
And so what you're suggesting is that in that scenario, the hotel operator management company would ask for a SOC 2 report from that vendor. And if a vendor can't provide a SOC 2 report, then that sort of raises a red flag that you should be using somebody else. Is that what I understand? Okay. Exactly.
You're summarizing it very well. And if they have no SOC 2 report, I would say it's more than a red flag. I would say you need to find someone else.
Right. Well, that's
Run.
let me check, see if there's any other questions. That looks like the last one. Anything, Julie, you'd like to summarize in conclusion of?
Well, I think it's the overall message here is that your customers are trusting you with their personal information. And as a business owner and a CFO, your responsibility is to provide stewardship over that data. It's become valuable more and more, and the risk is higher. And so just taking that seriously and being mindful of that and having that in your daily conversations and your trainings and your policies and procedures that and constantly thinking what could go wrong. Who do we need to, like you talked about the smaller hotel owner, if this is not an expertise that you have, you've got to partner with an advisor who has that expertise. And it's your job as a steward of your business.
I would add that if today's information has been meaningful to you, there's two things that you could do. The first two things you should do. The first one is talk to your IT people and go through some of this information and tell them you're interested in security, and they will help you. The second thing, and it's easy to do, is to get a written IT policy, and it shouldn't be too long, and get that out in front of your employees so that they have signed something that says they will act responsibly with your data. That's an inexpensive, easy way to get your feet wet with security. Now, as things go on, your IT policy should be signed every year by your people. You can use it as a training platform. You can update it. You can make it more specific in years to come. But just a general one-page policy. And as a matter of fact, I'll put one up on slideshare.com/Clark Nuber, just a small template. Our policy has evolved over the years to be rather large, but I'll put the small template up there, and you can at least use that as a start to work with your people. There's really, we can put systems in place to prevent security, but it's a lot easier and a lot less expensive to just rely on your people to do the right thing, and that starts with a good policy.
That's a good idea. Now, this webinar will go on to our website and has a pretty long shelf life. Will that access be there for that template for a good while? How does that, when you say you're going to put a template up on that?
Sure.
How long does that stay up there?
That'll stay up there indefinitely, but why don't I send you one also, and you can put it alongside this presentation on your site that way, and we're sure to cover it.
Okay. All right. Let me just double check one more time on questions. Looks like we're good. I want to thank Julie Eisenhauer and Peter Henley and Clark Nuber for providing us this information. It's, I think, very useful for the operators out there. We deal with the hotel owners, but many of them are operators. They all have management companies that management companies that use as third party or have their own that need to be aware of this. So it's good exposure, good information for them to be on top of. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This will be downloaded in a PDF. You can download a PDF of the list of today's featured hotel listings, plus a selection of additional hotel investment assets listed by HBI brokers under the attachments button on the top of the webcast player. Don't forget to rate the presentation today. Please go up and on the button ratings, give us your feedback. I want to remind everybody that this will be on the HBI website, so it can be accessed and reviewed, or you can share it with some of your partners and associates to become familiar with it I don't think it's our intent to make you experts, but at least to open up your eyes to certain areas of concern, and as Peter said, take it to your IT person and review it with them. So please do that. It will be up on the website within 24 hours. Also want to remind everybody that this and previous webcasts are available on demand at hbihotels.com. And you can go on there as well to pre-register and join us for the December 16th webinar, which will be with Jeff Higley, the Vice President of Digital Media and Editorial Director for STR and STR Global and Hotel News Now. And he will be sharing hotel performance data trends as they're tracked by Smith Travel Research and discuss the hospitality industry outlook for the coming year of 2016. So please mark that on your calendar, again, at 2 o'clock on December 16th. We'd also like to remind you of a few events on the fall calendar that HBI will be supporting. We will be at the Hotel Investors Conference in Europe being held in London early next week, the 28th and 29th. HBI will be exhibiting at the Intercontinental Hotel Group Trade Show being held in San Francisco September 30th through October 2nd. And we will also be exhibiting at the Vantage International Conference held in Las Vegas December 9th through 10th. So if you're at any one of those events, please come by and say hello to us. We'd be glad to talk with you. We again thank Clark Nuber and Julie and Peter for joining us today. Everyone have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.